Yep.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Karen Prosser, Executive Director of Chagrin Arts, and it's my official duty to welcome all of you tonight to the event featuring author Jim McCloskey and his outstanding book, When Truth Is All You Have. First off, I'd like to recognize and thank tonight's sponsors, Dayton Legal Heritage Foundation, John Carroll University, Xavier University, University of Dayton, and the Ohio Arts Council. And while I have your attention, because I see them on the screen, I have friends of mine from Federated Church. Pierce and I will be in another event on February 22nd, so please mark your calendars for that. It's about criminal justice in the state of Ohio. This event is being hosted by the Social Justice Advocacy Ministry of the Federated Church, and I know lots of you are on this call. So the presenters are Pierce and Maurice Glover and me. You can find out all sorts of information about it by going to chagrinarts.org and go under Arts with a Purpose programming, and you'll be able to register. Well, you'll get the link for that as well, but mark your calendars. Tonight there'll be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation, and we invite and encourage your questions through the chat room, and University of Dayton's Laura Franklin will be in charge of that. I now have the great pleasure, and I've said these words before, but because I mean them, I didn't even rewrite it, Pierce. So here goes. I now have the great pleasure of introducing my colleague and friend from the Ohio Innocence Project, who inspires and challenges my work in the arts and opens new doors that bring awareness and educates our audiences about wrongful conviction. Ladies and gentlemen, Pierce Reed, take it away.
Thank you, Karen, and welcome to all of you tonight. This is one of the programs that we've looked most forward to for a long time. Our very special guest tonight is Jim McCloskey. We're going to talk a little bit with him about his new book, When Truth Is All You Have, a Memoir of Faith, Justice, and Freedom for the Wrongfully Convicted. You can get it at Fireside Books in Chagrin Falls and at other lesser well-known and established retailers of your choice. OIP doesn't receive any dividends for the sale of the book, but I heartily encourage you to pick up a copy, either purchase it for yourself or for a loved one, or get it through a library. We still need to support our libraries, and it's really a wonderful read. And we're going to talk a little bit more to Jim about that, but to get everybody in the same place, one of the things that's most significant about Jim is that he is the founder of Centurion Ministries. Centurion is the very first organization in the United States that was formed purely for the purpose of freeing the wrongfully convicted. Many of you who work with the Ohio Innocence Project and our affiliates are familiar with the Innocence Projects around the country, and Centurion started almost 10 years before them. And it's really been a remarkable journey ever since. Beginning in 1983, Centurion met with success almost instantly. And since then, it is responsible for the release of 64 men and women around the country. Collectively, they served well over 1,300 years in prison. And shortly this month, Centurion will lead its 65th person to freedom. It's really been a remarkable journey, and in no small part, that's because of Jim. By way of introduction, if you're not familiar with him, Jim graduated from Bucknell University and then spent 3 years as a U.S. naval officer in Vietnam. Among other things there, he was awarded the Bronze Star for his service. When he came home, he spent well over a decade working in management. He was very successful in his corporate career, which involved consulting particularly with Japanese corporations. But despite all of his success, both in the service and in business, Jim felt a different kind of calling and ultimately enrolled in Princeton Seminary, with the intent of going on to become a minister. But while he was in seminary, he took a difficult assignment. It seems that Jim has volunteered for a lot of difficult assignments in his life, and that was to do counseling in one of New Jersey's more notorious prisons. And while he was there trying to do counseling and having been cautioned not to get involved with the legal affairs of the people who were being held in the prison, he came to believe the story of one of the men he met there. And when I say believe the story, the man admitted to some forms of criminal past driven largely by his addiction to heroin. But he was serving a prison sentence for a murder that he insisted he had not committed. And through Jim's work with that man, and ultimately with success in that case, he decided to go into a different kind of ministry, which turned out to be Centurion. And all of us are much better off for the choices that he's made. Although he says that he's retired and turned Centurion over to capable hands, one of his projects in retirement is this book. So we're going to talk to him a bit tonight about that. And as Karen mentioned, if you have questions, you can submit them in chat at any point. You don't have to wait until the end, but we'll try to get as many of them as we can. Jim, thank you so much for being here. One of the things that I love about your book is that it's about wrongful conviction, but it's about so much more. As you have in the title, it's a memoir about faith and the struggles with faith that you and I think so many other people go through, but also about justice and freedom. But one of the other things that occurred to me that's not in the title is it seems like it's also a series of love stories. Love for all different kinds of people that you've encountered in your life, love of God and your own faith. And like all relationships, not all of these things are nice and neat. In reality, there's a lot of rough edges to all of it. But I want to take you back to kind of the start of Centurion. And of the 65 people that you've worked with so closely and secured for freedom, and I know there are many more who didn't get freedom or don't have it yet, I want to take you back to Chiefy, Jorge de los Santos. And if you could just help the people who have joined us tonight understand a little bit about what it was like for you to meet Chiefy in that first meeting in prison. You describe it so well in the book, but not everyone's had the opportunity to read it yet.
Well, thank you very much, Pierce, for that very nice introduction. I appreciated that very much. And I'm also very happy to be here. We've had this on our schedule for quite some time. When it was suggested to me if I could meet on February 10th with you folks, that was back, I don't know, in October. I said, I'm sure I'm free in February, so no problem there. When I began my field education work at Trenton State Prison as a student chaplain, that was part of our field education requirement. I decided to join the student chaplaincy program, which meant that I was assigned 2 cell blocks in the maximum security wing of the prison. And I'm 37 years old at the time. I've been in Vietnam. I'm not a rookie. I'm not 22 years old right out of college, wet behind the ears. I'm fairly seasoned and experienced, but I was scared to death walking in that prison. I'd never had any connection in any way, shape, or form with any part of the criminal justice system, especially a prison. I did not sleep the night before, I can assure you of that, because you hear all kinds of rumors. Don't get too close to the cell. Now, we chaplains would be standing. We were assigned 2 cell blocks, and you go from cell to cell, standing in front of their cell bars and engage the inmate in conversation. We weren't there to evangelize or anything like that. We were just there to be their friend. But But Mr. De Los Santos, Chiefy, Chiefie, was what everybody called him, was an extreme. He was of Puerto Rican descent. He was in his at that time he was in his 6th year of a life sentence for a Newark, New Jersey murder. He was gregarious, affable, easy to talk to, funny. I would be standing in front of his cell with my looking like a priest with my collar on, dressed in black, and he was in his cell behind the bars, obviously, in his boxer shorts with a T-shirt and Elena, the name of his wife, tattooed on his chest, with long brown hair. But for whatever reasons, we hit it off immediately. I had to be careful because I had 40 inmates to visit each afternoon on the 2 cell blocks. So I had to be careful not to spend too much time with him because I enjoyed his company so much. But anyway, from practically the first 10 minutes of our meeting, all he would talk about was his innocence. He was persistent in proclaiming his innocence, that not only did he say that he didn't do it, but that he was framed by the police and the prosecutors. Now, at that point, I never gave it much thought that I didn't go looking for innocent people in prison whatsoever. That wasn't even on the radar screen. But at that point in my life, I thought our criminal justice system was flawless. I couldn't imagine that the police or prosecutors would in any way, knowingly or ineptly, arrest and prosecute innocent people. And if there was an innocent person, well, that was maybe 1 in 1,000 that slipped through the cracks. Now, obviously, I feel very differently about that today. But then I had a hard time believing that he was innocent, and more importantly, that the law enforcement people framed him. Anyway, long story short, over the next couple of months, as I would speak with him, he was so open about his past and the kind of life he led, and I felt myself he was engaging, and not in a slick con kind of a way, just in a very real, authentic, open-hearted manner. So over Thanksgiving holidays, I got his trial transcripts and read them carefully. And he was convicted based on a classic jailhouse confession of another heroin addict, and as it turned out, not an unreliable, but a lying eyewitness who also was a drug addict in the streets of Newark. All 3 knew each other. Chiefy knew both of the star witnesses against him. Anyway, I come back from Thanksgiving holiday and he says, look, these last couple of months, you've asked me a million questions about me and my case, and I've answered every one. He said, I have a question for you. And I gulped a little. I said, uh-oh. I said, what's that, Chiefy? He said, do you think I'm innocent? I said, well, yeah, I believe you're innocent. Then he got me by the short end. He said, what are you going to do about it? I said, what do you mean, what am I going to do? I can't do anything about it. I'm a seminarian. I'm a former business person. I don't know anything about the criminal justice system. He said, listen, I've been on my knees for the last 6 years praying to God to bring somebody, he called it an angel, to bring an angel and get me out of this hellhole. And whether you know it or not, you're that man. I believe God led you to my cell for you to free me. And he said, what are you going to do? You're going to go back to your nice, safe little seminary and pray that somebody comes along and rescues me from this? And I said, well, I guess, yeah, that's what I was thinking of. So anyway, he really challenged me to be a person. If you're a person of faith, how can you leave me here without lifting a finger to help free me? So I went back to the seminary and I thought about it, prayed about it, went into scriptures, and I came to believe he shook me. He shook me to the core. So I decided to take a year off from school and work full time on his behalf to do what I could to move the ball forward. Not only that, but humanly speaking, I spent the prior 18 months in that darn seminary, cloistered reading church history and scripture and, studying Hebrew or Greek, for God's sake. I was due for a break to get out in the real world and work. So this looked like a great opportunity. And I also felt, by the way, I felt really called. I think he was right. To this day, I think he was right, that God led me to his cell to do what I could to help free him. And it turned out to be my life's calling.
You describe that so beautifully in the book at different points because you meet him on your first day, right?
Right. Yep, that's right. Yep.
And there's another seminarian with you who's also scared, and the warden or someone brings you in, and the warden divides you from the other seminarian and puts you in different parts of the block.
Yes.
And you get sent to Chiefy's block.
Yes, he was another seminarian. His name was Joseph Checkup, and it was rather than the warden. It was the prison chaplain who was supervising our work as student chaplains, Reverend Joe Ravenel. So Ravenel assigned me to tiers B to C and D, and Joseph to A and B. So he was on two different tiers. I was on another two tiers. So it's interesting that you bring that up, Pierce, because a lot of things. First of all, this was the part of the state prison where those who got in trouble in other state prisons were assigned here as punishment for a year or so. So Chiefy had misbehaved at Rollway State Prison, and they sent him down here at what they call the Varoon Building, which is a special punishment section for those who misconduct themselves in other facilities. But it was, here he was. I mean, I could have been assigned to the cell blocks that Joseph Checker was assigned to, and he could have not gotten in trouble. And he happened to be on the Varoon Building, on the cell block at the time I hit it. So there was a lot of, the stars were aligned, and it was meant to be. And and I'll tell you another thing. I would not have. So I worked, let me just say this if I can. I worked for a full year on his behalf. I was living in a rent-free, in a very nice home, owned and occupied by an octogenarian, Mrs. Yateman, who took me in exchange for me doing errands for her. My bedroom in her home was the Centurion Ministries headquarters, free of rent for the first 7 years. But anyway, I just consider myself very fortunate. So I was able, during that year, I reinvestigated the case. It's another thing, because I know I would think we have parents here, but think about this for a second, if you will. And that is this. When I decided to leave the business world and go to the ministry, enroll in the seminary, my parents and friends were stunned. They had no idea that I was even thinking about this, or was so unhappy with the life that I was leading, and that my spiritual life was starting to really take root and develop with me. And here I am. So a year and a half after that, after shocking my parents, especially that I'm leaving the business world and going into ministry, a year and a half later, now I'm telling my mother and father that, well, Mom and Dad, I'm going to take a year off from school and work to free a former heroin addict from Newark who's doing life for murder. I mean, imagine what you would have thought about your son, that he went off half-cocked here. This is not good, Jim. And my mother said to me that she worried about me going up to Newark and investigating a murder, which I knew nothing about. And that she says, Jimmy, this is going to be the same thing when you were in Vietnam. I'm not going to get any sleep at all worrying about you, which I had never thought of. But it didn't deter me from doing what I did. But there were a lot of forks in the road. And long story short, I found a great lawyer, Paul Castellero, who for the last 40 years has worked on a number of Centurion Ministries cases, and gave up his private practice 7 years ago to become our legal director, the Centurion legal director. So Paul and I freed Mr. De Los Santos in July of 1983. By that time, I worked full time. I took that year off, returned to the seminary, got my degree. But through Chiefy, I met 3 other New Jersey lifers in whose innocence I came to believe. So in the summer of 83, I decided rather than getting ordained to become a church pastor, I'm going to set up this nonprofit organization, which I called Centurion Ministries. It was named after the centurion in the Gospel of Luke, who looked up at the crucified Christ and said, surely this one was innocent. That's where the name came from. So I started by myself in 1983. By that time, I was broke, but my parents came into an extraordinary gift, and they gave each of their 3 kids a $10,000 tax-free gift, and that was my manna from heaven and seed capital to start Centurion.
Well, one of the things when you were starting was the lack of money, and it took a little while for that good gift to come your way. But you also didn't really have much experience with investigation or any of that. So was it just a leap of faith? Was it just this belief that you could do it, or what made you take those steps besides Chiefy?
Well, yeah, again, Pierce, I was 30. Well, by the time I started, when I started work for Chiefy, I was 30, 37, 38 years old. I don't know. I just, it was exciting for me. It was an adventure. It was an entrepreneurial thing. And I like to think that I have both an adventuresome and an entrepreneurial spirit. That's my nature. It always has been. And when I was in business, I did a lot of in Tokyo. I would go to Korea, Taiwan, and do marketing studies for corporate clients. And what I would do would be to interview manufacturers, wholesalers, retailers, and put the pieces of the market together. And that's what that's what investigation is. You go out and you first of all, you have all the trial transcripts. You develop an investigative plan. You want to see witness A, B, C, and D who testified. You also want to see, excuse me, get rid of that. You also want to, there's in police reports, there's so many people that were not interviewed by either the defense or the prosecutor. So you have a prospective list of interviewees, and you go one by one by one. Now, the thing that I think, any good investigator, there are plenty of them. You have to have, when I'm knocking, first of all, I never use a telephone. Never use a telephone. It's too easy to say no on the phone. So I always present myself by knocking on their door and present myself. This is who I am and why I'm here. Let them take the measure of me and see I'm not threatening. I like people. You develop a rapport and a trust with these folks. I don't judge them. I don't judge them at all for whatever lifestyle they're in, or the fact that they lied at trial years before. I can connect with people. You have to have some good human relation skills, and I like people. And over time they respond to. Really, I'm the first person in their lives, who have anything to do with this case, that are treating them with respect and kindness and gentleness. Most of the time, they've been manhandled by the law enforcement people. And by the way, by the time I come along years later, if they've lied and sent an innocent man or woman to prison, and if they have any kind of a heart, they feel terrible for what they did. They feel so guilty. They have nightmares about it, but they can't go to anyone because who can they talk to? They don't have any. So we come along and they talk to us, and we start slowly but surely bringing them forward.
Jim, for all your success, I was telling you before we started officially tonight how even my boss, who has been around for a while in received a lot of praise himself. He was really excited that you had agreed to do this. And I've consistently heard that around the country. Everyone talks about you as a hero, sometimes as a savior. But one of the things that struck me the most about your book is you have this great sense of humility, which it goes with faith if we're practicing our faith, I think, the way we're supposed to. But one of the things that was most striking is that you describe Chiefy as essentially the founder of Centurion. You don't just take the credit yourself. You talk about, it's really the special part in the book where you talk about this Puerto Rican heroin addict from New York is the one who started it all.
Right,
And
yes.
just so sincere. Is that how you feel about the people that you've worked with?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that point up, Pierce, because it's so important. Centurion Ministries, there would be no Centurion Ministries were it not for this heroin addict, this innocent heroin addict from Newark, who, by the way, sadly, tragically, when we freed him, he couldn't help. He went back onto the streets and started using drugs again. And 10 years after we freed him, he ended up back in prison for a robbery of a drug addict in Newark, and did a stretch of 7 or 8 years. And by that time, I wanted to, I don't know. I wasn't angry at him. He just couldn't stay away from the drugs. They killed him. And eventually he was found, when he was freed, he was found in a vacant lot in Brooklyn, murdered in a drug deal that went awry. But what I'm saying is, were it not for this man, Jorge de los Santos, there would be no Centurion Ministries. And a case can be made that 64 other people might not be free were it not for this man. And I thank God for him. Another person who would have been lost had I not met him, and had he not challenged me to begin work on his case, and it turned out the way that it did in terms of we freed and exonerated him, I would have been lost in the world, because I would not, the church pastorate, as it turned out, would not have been for me. And this gave me new life. We gave Chiefy new life, Paul and I did, but he gave me new life. Life where a sense of purpose and authenticity, and a mission in life, and a calling from God. So he made me, this man, Jorge de los Santos, he made me what I became. And, and then let's not forget Kate Germond, who's been with me for, most of these years. She joined me in '87, and Paul Castellero, who's been with me for 40 years, and a fantastic staff of Centurion. We have 14 staff members and volunteers from all walks of life. These people have come to us, and were it not for them, it's a team effort. We couldn't have done this work. So, too much. The founder of an organization gets too much credit, and that's the way I feel about myself. I appreciate what Mark thought or thinks, but the credit goes to all these great people over the years who have worked for us, and for the exonerees who have inspired us and taught us a lot about life as well.
There's so much affection that comes through your book when you talk about your clients. And that's something I think a lot of us understand. There's something about them that just teach you everything you ever really wanted to know about faith, the power of hope, forgiveness, truth as redemption. But you also see them not just for their labels, like heroin addict. There's a point in the book where you describe, after Chiefy has walked out of prison with you and you're driving him home, he's going to be with the wife that he's longed for, whose name is tattooed above his heart.
Right.
And you remember that he always wanted a banana split. So you stop and you get him this banana split.
That's right. That's right.
But when you're talking about it, you describe watching him eat. And here's this man who, in some ways, is not a child. He's done very adult things in a lot of different ways. But the way you describe him, the way he's just so enjoying the whipped cream and the chocolate syrup, and
Right.
it almost sounds like you felt this parental affection for him, that you're looking at him as this innocent. And it's the same idea of, I think, a parent bringing an innocent child into the world, or in a lot of religion, the idea of Christ or whomever the savior or prophet is in that faith system. It's one of the things that's just so beautiful about the book and consistent throughout it. And you do that with both men and women. You just mentioned Katie, Germond, your compatriot there. You know, people forget that 1987, there was a lot of backlash towards women in all employment. But throughout your book, you talk a lot about women as attorneys, Katie, everything she did for your organization. You had this great quote about her. And as soon as I read it, I remember the first time I met her by phone, and I thought, this is perfect writing. You said, she was enough of a hippie to want to do right in the world, but enough of the bookkeeper to figure out how to get it done.
Yeah.
And it seems to summarize her so well. But was it just desperation that made you hire her to take on this venture with you?
No. What it was her. She, first of all, when Paul and I, again, Paul Castellero, we freed our third innocent New Jersey lifer, Nate Walker. That was in November of '86. This was the first blush of publicity that we received for the work that we were doing on behalf of the innocent. And Kate had just moved to New York City with her husband, Mark, and she read an article about this exoneration of Nate Walker in the New York Times. And they had a photo of me in my bedroom at Mrs. Yateman's house, and I had a table that was tilting with transcripts all over the place. And Kate took one look at that photo and said, "This man needs help." But not only that, she was a great devotee of Nancy Drew growing up. And she was fascinated with being and when she would watch Perry Mason, she would identify with the investigator, not the lawyer. So she always was fascinated with criminal investigation work. And here she's reading this article. So she contacted me, and I met her in New York City, and right away we clicked. And she would commute from New York to my bed. She worked in my bedroom when I was on the road working on cases. She worked in my bedroom for, a year and a half until, without even consulting with me, she decided to get us an office down in downtown Princeton, which was great. But Kate she's got she's very smart she's got a heart as big as the Grand Canyon, and she's razor sharp, and she gets it. She is about, she's a couple years younger than I am. So she was well in her 30s when she began work with me, and was seasoned adult. She is just as responsible as I am for whatever success Centurion has had in developing our organization and doing our work. Remember the movie, The Field of Dreams? If you build it, they will come. Well, you take Paul Castellero, for God's sake. I mean, this guy's been with us for 40 years. And I met him I was looking for an attorney for Chief de los Santos. And I was directed to this law firm in Morton Stavis, who was a fairly well-known constitutional lawyer at that time. And I asked Mr. Stavis if he would, to take this de los Santos case. He gave it to Paul Castellero. And then Paul and I worked well together, and one thing led to another, and he's doing a number of Centurion cases, and without these people, none of this would have happened. So I am just one cog in the wheel, believe me, in us being able to accomplish what we have been able to do so far. It's all about people, Pearson. You know that as well as I do. We've been very fortunate to attract great people who are dedicated and skilled and smart, and they just really, they're a godsend. Everybody's a godsend.
There's so many wonderful stories in the book, but you also acknowledge the ones that didn't end up the way you would have wanted. And one of those cases that really struck me was Roger Coleman.
Yeah.
A death row case. And you have a line where you say, basically, that some people are teaching you how to live your life, and some people teach you how to die. And that's how you remembered Mr. Coleman. Can you tell the audience a little bit about his case and how it ended?
Well, Roger Coleman was a coal miner in Grundy, Virginia, which is in the southwestern corner of Virginia, right underneath West Virginia, and right next to Kentucky, just tucked in that little corner of the world. And he was a coal miner, and he was convicted. And Grundy's a town of about 700 people. It's very, very Appalachian, if you will. But anyway, he was convicted of a brutal murder and rape of his sister-in-law, the sister of his wife. Wanda McCoy was her name. She was 19 when she was killed. Roger was 22, and he was convicted. He was convicted based on some what I consider to be faulty forensic evidence. Namely, remember in those days there was no DNA. This was in 1982 when she was murdered, and he was convicted and sentenced to death. He was convicted, and I spoke with the trial judge. He said the thing that convicted Roger was when the forensic state lab person came in and told the jury that the hair found on the body of the victim was almost certainly Roger Coleman's hair. Now, we have since learned that hair analysis was very suspect with DNA. The FBI did a major study when they compared their hair analysis and testimony against the defendant, incriminating the defendant based on the hair analysis, to DNA of that same hair years later, and they were wrong 96% of the time. This is the FBI admitting this in their study that they did. So anyway, and the whole state's theory as to how it happened. Roger was at work that night when she was killed between 10:30 and 11 o'clock one night. At 10 o'clock, Roger reported in his dirty, coal dust-laden work clothes, to the mine for his shift working the coal mines. And when he got up to the top of the mountain, they told him your shift has been canceled. Right now, we'll tell you when to come back. So he drove down the mountain, met a friend of his, and conversed with him at 10:30. And this time was able to be established. I followed Roger's movements from 10 o'clock all the way to when he got home at 11:05 to join his wife in their trailer. I followed his every single movement, and I spoke with every person he talked to, and I did all the time, and there's no way that he could have done that. He didn't have the opportunity, and he certainly didn't have the motivation. Anyway, I came to believe Roger was innocent, and I began investigating his case in 1988. Turned out that we never could get an evidentiary hearing. He was convicted in he was executed in 1992. By that time, Arnold and Porter, the law firm out of Washington, they had assigned a very smart young attorney, Kitty Behan, to work with me on behalf of Roger. She was a lawyer, and she did a great job. We were able to, what we thought, develop a really good suspect who lived behind the victim. We found 4 other women with who he sexually assaulted around the same time that Wanda, his next door neighbor, was killed. And 2 of those women, when they were yelling when he was raping them, he told them to shut up or he'll do the same thing they did to Wanda McCoy that he'll do to them. So anyway, but no court would hear this new evidence. And Kitty and I spent the last several hours with Roger on death row. We sat on the concrete floor right outside his death cell on May 20th, 1992, down there in Virginia. And Kitty and I would take turns talking with Roger. We shared his last meal together, which was a cold Domino's pizza that was delivered to death row. And this man, Roger Coleman, he's going to be dead. He's going to be executed. He's going to be electrocuted in the chair in 2 hours. And he's thanking Kitty and me for all the work that we did. And, don't you guys, you did your best and I really appreciate it. And he had a spirit of forgiveness for those who put him there. And then they asked us to leave about an hour before the execution when they shaved him and got him ready for the electric chair. And I didn't, Kitty nor I attended the execution, but we were in the administration building when he was executed at midnight that night. And so I promised Roger, I said, look, I will do whatever I can post-execution to exonerate you. And he sat in that electric chair. His last words were, the Commonwealth of Virginia is executing an innocent man tonight. Anyway, 14 years later, when DNA had really progressed almost to where it is today in terms of precision of developing a specific DNA profile, I was able to convince, along with another great lawyer, Paul Zena in Washington, together, Paul and I convinced Virginia Governor Mark Warner, now Senator Warner, to allow the DNA on the vaginal swab that was taken from the victim 25 years earlier, to get that DNA. We agreed to send it up to a Canadian a lab, and the results came back in January of 2006. And the DNA, the semen found in her that was DNA'd, turned out to be Roger Coleman's. I was stunned. And so now I still don't, even with that, there's only two reasons or 2 ways that his semen could be in her. One is he killed her and raped her, as the Commonwealth said, or he was having a secret affair with her. And I have no information or evidence that he was, or that they were having such an affair, although she was a very shy gal, and even her husband told the police the only person she would let in her home when he wasn't there would be Roger Coleman, because they had such a good relationship. I don't know, but I know this. I don't know how he did it, if he did do it. So I'm still haunted by, did he do it or didn't he do it? And so there you have it.
Jim, we're going to turn to the audience for some questions and give Laura and Claudia a chance to get them ready. But I wanted to ask you one that you kind of pose yourself in your book. You're talking about things like this, that it's not always a happy ending, and that your faith was challenged along the way. And you wrote, there is always hope if you believe in God or if you don't. One of my best investigators was an atheist, or at least someone who seemed to have no interest in God or religion. And I have pondered many a long night over many a good bourbon, who has it harder, Those of us who see the horrors and injustice of the world and wonder why God lets these things happen, or those of us who see the horrors and believe there's no God to turn to. Have you ever been able to answer that question?
Not to my satisfaction. I'm still a person of faith, although my faith has been shaken over the years. I worked on behalf of another man, another death row inmate in Texas, Kerry Max Cook, which the book talks about. So I won't go into detail about that. But I saw Kerry through 3 retrials throughout the 1990s. And that second retrial, we eventually freed him. But that second trial, he got reconvicted and sent back to death row. And I'm sitting there at the defense table. I'm not reading transcripts. I'm sitting right there working with Paul Nugent, the lawyer I retained to work with me on the case at the defense table. And when he was reconvicted and sent back to death row, I flew home to Princeton and asking the eternal question, why? Why, if there is a God, why does God allow these injustices to happen like that? What redeeming value, what redeeming purpose is there to send an innocent man back to death row again? And I checked myself into a retreat center, actually a parish, Catholic parish, where the priest was kind enough to let me have a room, and I just stayed there for a week, read a lot of scripture, didn't pray that much because I started to wonder about the power of prayer, but I did read scripture. And I came across a passage which I have probably read 1,000 times, but I never saw it the way I saw it during that week. And that was this, where Jesus is talking in the Beatitudes about how God the Father has the sun shine on the just and the unjust, and rain falls on the good and the evil. Well, my interpretation of that then and now, New Testament scholars might argue with me about my interpretation, but my interpretation was, so that's it, God. It's just, doesn't matter what you do on earth or how you conduct yourself. Good things are going to happen and bad things are going to happen, regardless of who you are and what you do. Which is what happens. I mean, being a crime victim, accident, disease, all kinds of suffering befalls people all over the world, and even little babies and children in children's hospitals. Why is all this suffering? Why all this suffering if there's a just and loving God? And I haven't answered that question yet, although I still believe, and I'm a follower of the Lord.
Again, everyone, the book is When Truth Is All You Have by Jim McCloskey. We have a few minutes left.
Pierce, can I say one thing about the title of the book?
Yes, you certainly may.
Thank you. And I give full credit to the Doubleday senior editor who came up with the title, because there's a short paragraph in the book that he lighted on when he read it. And that is, I talk in the book about how innocent people, when they get convicted and sent to prison and they're all alone, nobody believes them. The only friend they have, really, who never leaves them, who's always by their side, is their rock and their strength, is the truth. They know, they don't believe, they know they're innocent. They know what the truth is, that they did not do this crime. And that gives them the strength and the hope and the courage to carry on the truth that they're innocent.
It's funny you mentioned that part, because that was one of the things I was going to ask you, but we were running out of time. And I know you wrote it about the people in prison, but when I read it, I remember thinking that's what happens to people who work on these cases too. It's finding that truth, whatever it is. So,
yes, exactly.
Claudia, did you have a question from someone that you'd like to ask our esteemed guest?
Yeah, so I have one question from a person, and it starts with a preface. She says, I appreciate the humility in your words when you say that you believe that the founder of an organization gets too much credit. but I have to say that in this case, you deserve all the accolades. I have been well aware of the Innocent Project for many years and the importance of DNA analysis in their work. But before I read your book, I did not realize that those cases that I read about in the newspapers back in the 80s took so much boots on the ground type of investigation that you did. What really struck me in your book was the amount of work that you did based on gut instinct and sheer perseverance. Did you ever feel close to burnout, and do you miss the groundwork now?
That's a good question. And I have to say that no, I've never felt burned out in doing the work. However, after doing this field investigation and spending half of my time flying all over the country, reinvestigating cases, boots on the ground work, when I retired in 2015 from the day-to-day management of Centurion, and I turned over the reins to my esteemed colleague, Kate Germond, I kept my 7 cases that I've been working on for years. I've been working on them for the last 5 or 6 years since I retired. And I'm happy to say that 6 of the 7 have been freed. But let me say this, I could not, I don't have the energy or the wherewithal to start a new case. I'm done. It would not be fair to any inmate if I decide, well, I'll get back in the game and I'll take one more case on. I don't have anything left to do that with. I'm 78. I'll be 79 in a couple months, and I'm spent in terms of reinvestigating cases.
Well, you earned your rest and your retirement, but I don't believe it's a retirement for a minute.
Well, like I was telling you beforehand, Pierce, and you mentioned it in your introduction, we're about ready to free Ben Spencer. We believe we are, because the DA is joining us in Dallas, Texas. He's been in prison for 34 years. His name is Ben Spencer. And finally, the DA, because the DA has joined us, and we have new evidence that all 4 witnesses against him lied 34 years ago. But anyway, he is just today at 3:00 this afternoon. He just arrived. He was picked up from the state pen and delivered to the Dallas County Jail, awaiting the order from the judge to release him, which should occur sometime next week. So, Cheryl Watley, who's this Dallas lawyer, and I, and Gary Udishin, who's Mr. Innocence of Texas, a great lawyer. But Cheryl and I have been working on behalf of Ben for 21 years. And we've taken his claims of innocence and the new evidence to the 4 prior district attorneys' administration. All of them ignored us, dismissed us, fought us tooth and nail, except this new DA, John Creuzot, one of the progressive DAs that was elected in recent times. He had his conviction integrity unit reinvestigate the case. They discovered new evidence that we didn't know about. And so together, it's a great thing when you can, this is the way the system should work. When the district attorney is provoked by the possibility of the innocence of a convicted person in their jurisdiction, and they wholeheartedly and authentically and genuinely join with the defense to try and seek justice for this particular person. And when the DA, and you guys know this here, when the DA joins you, the Red Sea opens up. And that's what's going to happen here. So that's the last case I'll be working on. There's one more in St. Louis, but Paul Castellero is really handling that primarily. And this is a great way to go for have the last case.
Well, I know it won't be the last case ever, but it may be your last case.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah.
I said may. I didn't say that it would be, but Jim, we cannot thank you enough. You were always welcome in Ohio, but tonight you have made more friends than you know. So if you ever can travel safely back to Ohio, we would all collectively take you out for that glass of bourbon, so some good advice. It's you're the kind of religious figure in my childhood that could have done me a lot better than the ones that are continually frustrated. But
Right.
it's a beautiful, beautiful book, truly. It is about wrongful conviction, but it is about so much more. Tonight, we barely scratched the surface. It really is a love story. People that you've loved, your family, women that you've known, but your love of the work that you do and the love that people have you for doing it and doing it so well. It's really been an honor to have you here. Make sure before we go, you can remind people if they're interested how they can donate to Centurion. I know you have friends in influential places, but you are doing the hard work all around the country. And like all Innocence organizations, I know you have to struggle for funds sometimes. So it's Centurion Ministries.
Yes.
Okay.
The Centurion Ministries, and we're in Princeton, New Jersey, and go to our website. It's very easy to find, and you'll find if the Spirit moves you to help us out financially, we would love that and encourage it. But go to the website, and it's very easy to make a contribution in various ways. So thank you and Pierce. By the way, let me just say this. I want to thank you. You've been very generous in your words towards me and what we do, and I want to tell you that you've really touched my heart, and I appreciate that very much. So thank you.
My pleasure, my honor. Don't forget the book. Valentine's Day's coming. It is about love, among other things. Easter and Passover will be here. Put it in someone's basket. Make sure you get it. It is money well spent and stories extremely well told. So thank you, Jim. Thank you, Karen, Chagrin Arts. Thank you to our wonderful teams at Xavier University, John Carroll University, and the University of Dayton. You are all wonderful. And hello to all you folks up at Federated. We can't wait to come back. We fell in love with you years ago. So.
And I want to thank Karen as well, and Katie Wood, and all the universities who have helped this event occur tonight. So thank you to all of you for making this happen.
For those of you still here, Laura has put up in your chat box information about Centurion and the Donate Now button. Karen probably has one for Chagrin Arts too, but we'll catch you on that one the next time.
Okay. All right.
Thank you all. And thank you again, Jim.
Goodbye. Thank you. Good seeing you all. Stay out of trouble now.